Hey everybody, and welcome to the BWC Online Bible Study. Today we're looking at Exodus chapter 1. As we look at Exodus chapter 1 today, we are going to be talking about the nation of Israel, how they grew from a family into a nation. They're in Egypt at this moment because of the famine that had happened before. The family of Israel, Jacob's family, moves to Egypt, and this is where they are now. And so we're going to start off in verse 1, Exodus chapter 1, and we're going to read through. It says, "These are the names of the sons of Israel, that is Jacob, who moved to Egypt with their father, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. In all, Jacob had 70 descendants in Egypt, including Joseph, who was already there. In time, Joseph and all of his brothers died, ending an entire generation. Their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly that they became extremely powerful and they filled the land." So Israel is so much more than just a place. This is a people. These are the descendants of Abraham. This is a family that started off not even being able to have a baby, that God has grown into, through his mighty power and miraculous work, has grown into an entire nation. And this nation was growing, and it had been many generations passed down. And it says, eventually a new king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, "Look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us, and then they will escape from the country." So he makes this fake scenario in order to put down this people that he's intimidated by. He doesn't understand why they are there because the history hasn't been passed down. And as we read more about him, you just see that there's evil in his heart. And, we have an adversary, the enemy, the devil, who's seeking who he can devour. And of course, the enemy is going to want to squash the nation of Israel because they are very important to the plan that God has to bring the Messiah into the earth. So it's so much more than what's going on the surface, as what's spiritually going on here as well. So he makes the fake scenario, he gets everybody on board, and he enslaves the Israelites. It says, "So the Egyptians made the Israelites slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build cities of Pithom and Ramses as supply centers for the king." Pithom and Ramses as supply centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread. The more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and bricks and do all the work in the fields, and they were ruthless in their demands. So they oppressed them. But what ended up happening? They spread, they grew even more. It reminds me of reading stories from the New Testament where they tried to stop Jesus, but the message of Jesus spread even more. They tried to stop the disciples from spreading the message, the good news. And as they oppressed them, the message of Jesus spread even more. No matter what the enemy's plan or plot may be to try to stop what God is doing, it's never going to work. God is going to win. And usually he takes what the enemy meant for harm and turns it around for his glory. So this nation that this evil Pharaoh is trying to oppress, that he is oppressing, begins to grow even more. It says, "The Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah." So I've read the Bible before, but as I was listening to commentary from Dr. Baruch Corman on Shifra and Puah, who these two women were and what they did for the nation of Israel, just the bravery that they had to be able to follow the command of God. Some people get the idea that the Bible is against women, that it tries to put them down or oppress them, or all these different things, and a lot of that has to do with people not understanding cultural context, or really like learning how to study scripture. But here we see God using these two Hebrew women. He called them to be the ones to save so many lives. It says, when you help, this is what the Pharaoh tells these two midwives: when you help deliver the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If the baby is a boy, kill him. If the baby is a girl, let her live. Because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's orders. They allowed the boys to live too. So they put their own lives at risk. They showed so much bravery in doing this when they had been given a direct order from a king who was already oppressing so many, and just the evil intent that he had toward this people. They had a choice. Were they going to honor this king, or were they going to honor God? Now, this is different than paying your taxes or being obedient to the authority that's over you. This is an evil command where they are asking these women to commit murder, and they refused to obey the king's command. They allowed the boys to live. So the king of Egypt calls for the midwives. "Why have you done this?" he demanded. "Why have you allowed these boys to live?" "The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women," the midwives replied. "They are more vigorous and have babies so quickly that they cannot get in there, that we cannot get in there in time." So God was good to these midwives because they chose to obey him. Sometimes we can choose to obey and do what God is asking us to do, and he will bless us in that. So God was good to the midwives. The Israelites continued to multiply and grow more and more powerful. And because the midwives feared God, God gave them their own families. So this blessing came on them for their obedience to the Lord. And then, the Pharaoh's not just going to give up. He gave the order to all his people, throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live. So as we wrap up the end of Exodus chapter 1, before we move on to Exodus chapter 2, this story of trying to wipe out a nation, this story of these two women who choose to obey the Lord and God pouring out his blessing on them. This story of seeing how what the enemy means for harm, God is going to use for his glory. And that no matter how hard the enemy tries to stop the plan of God, he's not going to be able to stop it. He may be able to do some things, but he will never be able to stop God. God is going to win this battle. God ends up bringing Jesus into the earth just like he planned. He has a plan for these end times that we're walking through right now. God has a plan, and you can choose to be part of what God's doing if you will sometimes break through and go against the grain and obey God. I'm not saying go against the grain for the sake of going against the grain. I'm saying go against the grain and do what God's asking you to do. That's what I want to leave you with at the end of the book of or the chapter of Exodus chapter 1, and I will catch you guys back again in Exodus chapter 2. You guys be blessed. Have a really great day.